Foreign tourists to Japan hitting a record high last year despite a steep fall in visitors from China in December. The country saw a total of 42.7 million arrivals in 2025, topping the last record set the year before. Although the number of Chinese tourists dropped 45% on year in December. The slide taking place as Beijing and Tokyo are engaged in a deepening diplomatic spat after Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi said in November that Japan could intervene if Taiwan is attacked. The Chinese government urged its citizens to avoid traveling to Japan following her comments. Now, Chinese tourists had been the biggest source of foreign visitors for the first 9 months of 2025, making up about a quarter of total arrivals. Now, to explain what's driving the boom in Japan is Asia travel and tourism analyst Gary Bowerman, director at High Yield Tourism, and he joins us live from Kuala Lumpur. Gary, good to have you on the show. Now, Japan, as I've just mentioned, posted record visitor numbers. When you break it down, what's really driving it? Is it the weak yen? Is it more flights? Is it pent-up demand or something else?
Yeah, hi, Roland. I think it's a combination of all of those things. Certainly since the pandemic, we've seen a huge growth in desire to travel to Japan. We've seen, as you say, a great supply demand in terms of connective flights. We've seen really strong rebound from key markets like China up until November, but also South Korea, Hong Kong, Taiwan, Thailand as well. So it's just been, over the past few years, it's been the destination in Asia Pacific, and the figures show that 42 million visitors, 42.7 million visitors last year. That means that it's doubled its visitor arrivals since 2016. That's quite an achievement, even though that's 5 years late. It actually hoped to break the 40 million boundary back in 2020 when it hosted the Olympics, or it was supposed to host the Olympics, but COVID intervened.
This trade spat between China and Japan, I mean, mainland China is still a huge part of Japan's tourism story. With China arrivals getting softer now, has Japan actually China-proofed its tourism market, or are the market still vulnerable to tensions if it flares up again?
Yeah, I don't think it's China-proofed. I think what we're going to see now is another reset, and a lot of this will depend on the election and who wins on February the 8th in Japan. But the current status is that the Chinese market is weak and is going to get weaker through the year. We've got the very important Lunar New Year holiday coming up, and obviously that will be a benchmark of just how weak the Chinese market is into Japan. But as you said earlier, Roland, somewhere between 21-24% of visitors last year, depending on the finalized figures, were from China. You know, that's a huge part of the market, and it's not just about the visitor numbers, it's their spending power. And because Chinese tend to travel to Japan for short stay trips, they tend to spend more because they're there for a short amount of time and they have bigger budgets to spend. So it's a very big issue for Japan going forward, particularly as it has this longer term goal of it wants to attract 60 million visitors in the coming years. You'd have to say without the Chinese market, that simply wouldn't be possible.
The weaker yen has been one of the things that has been attractive to many visitors. Are you seeing bargain hunter boom, that i.e. more people but cheaper trips, or are you seeing high yield booms? I mean, you know, luxury hotels, shopping, longer stays. I mean, what does the data feel like on the ground for you?
I think it's very mixed. I think you're right. I think initially, as we came out of COVID and Japan was a very desirable travel destination, and the yen dropped significantly, that had a big impact. It was a big incentive for people to travel to Japan and to shop and to stay. But as you reported quite recently, just before this segment, you know, inflation is rising in Japan, and so the whole travel desire and the whole affordability of the country is changing a little bit. We may see, depending on the election, we may see a more expansionary economic policy, which possibly could push up inflation. So the value of the yen is very important and has been over the past 2 or 3 years. But going forward, it will now be Japan will have to sell itself on its country, on its destination, on its experiences, not just on that lower yen, because I think that actual impact is starting to dissipate a little bit.
I want to pick up on that. I mean, Japan is headed to a general election soon, and politicians will start talking about the yen, about the cost of living crisis in a way that could move the markets. How does that change the tourism outlook for you, say, the next 3-6 months?
I think there's that, and I think there's also the changing social attitudes towards travel. Japan was on this fast track to attracting more and more tourists, and there was a real pushback in society about what the impact that this was, particularly in the busier cities like Japan, Osaka, Kyoto. They were just becoming too busy. So does Japan modify its tourism policy going forward to attract more higher yield tourists, less on the volume tourism focus? But that also depends on demand. If there is still strong demand, particularly from within the Asia Pacific region, then you will still see numbers climb month on month. So I think there's a whole mixed pot at the moment, Roland, in terms of the election, in terms of the economic policy, in terms of geopolitics, in terms of demand. I think 2026 generally in our region is quite a difficult year to project. Japan obviously is at the front of the queue. It's where people want to travel. It's a hot destination. But there are issues, economic, political, and geopolitical issues, which you have to take into account. And those will unravel as we go through the year.
And surely over-tourism is a real flashpoint, as you just mentioned. Do you expect Japan to lean into, say, for example, higher visitor taxes, stricter rules, or even capacity controls? I mean, what's the most practical way to manage the crowds without actually killing the boom?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question. I get asked that all the time, Roland. I think what Japan has been doing, and you've seen this in different parts of the country, is tinkering with its taxes, with its hotel taxes. But these really aren't much of a disincentive at the moment. The rates are still relatively small in terms of disincentivizing people to come. They're just raising more revenue from tourists. And I think that's another thing that we've seen around the world in terms of tackling over tourism. If you just raise taxes or you raise fees, people generally are prepared to pay for them if they want to go to that destination. So a whole rethink on over-tourism is much over needed. It's the hottest topic, really, apart from AI and travel and tourism at the moment. And certainly Japan is at the forefront of this thinking. Japan has a really opportunity to dissipate and to channel travelers around its country, but that also comes with its own risks, because some regions, secondary and third tier regions, aren't really ready for the numbers of tourists that you would get in places like Osaka or Kyoto. So it's a big challenge, Roland, and I think we'll be talking about this for the rest of the year and probably through the rest of the decade.
And we will be keeping an eye on what authorities will be doing. Gary, thanks for those insights. That was Gary Bowerman, Director at High Yield Tourism.